Because smart city is such a broad topic and such a broad category right now at this stage of the industry, smart city means a lot of different things. There are a lot of different use cases that can be utilized as part of smart city. Are we talking about smart transportation, smart parking, digital patrol, LED lighting? So what I've heard a consistent theme throughout here is that it really depends on what the needs of the residents and the needs of the businesses are. So the two-part question for you three, for you two in terms of the communities in which you serve and you in the communities that as an investor on utility that you're working with, how do you define smart city today? And the other part of that is, how smart is smart city? How smart do you need to be in order to say we have a smart city?
I think we're a smart city in motion. I think that we're constantly evolving. We have two initiatives that we're really looking at right now. We're looking at health and health equity and parks and trails. So one of the things that are very important to our citizens is we have 90 miles of trails, 32 miles of hike and bike. But what does that mean? How do I scale that? How many residents are using our bikes and our trails and our trailheads? We have entered into an NDA. That's a problem. I would love to talk about this whole Playscape people and the technology that we're using in with this Playscape system is an all abilities Playscape. It'll be interactive, it'll monitor activity, the rate of motion, and it's really meant to integrate with kids. And so for us, if we're actually speaking about building new infrastructure and building new park systems, who is really using them and how do we measure that in order to make a case for additional park system? I have 3 kids, they get bored very easily. I think we want them to really use the environment and the parks and the public spaces that we're building, we want them to use it. How do we measure that? How do I identify that? Really, rather than being home and looking at the iPad, can they be out really, using the environment? And then how on the second part, we have a very high case of diabetes in South Texas. Is there a way that we can improve health and diabetes and improve our health in our communities? So that health sector, the health sector, the park and quality of life sector, how do we measure quality of life? Is there a way to measure that? And also another sector that we're looking at is, of course, space. So with the startup company that we are actually supporting a nonprofit. It's called Expanding Frontiers. It's with UT-RGV. So UT is a big partner with the city of Brownsville. Our Dr. Rick Janae, he's our astrophysicist there. He's a professor there. He has created a nonprofit, and by there we're actually including the school district in creating space academies, space settlement explorer academies, and those initiatives. So for us, it's our business economy. Smart city is not just about the traditional way of meters and transportation. It really should be smart economies as well. And if that includes different aligning and bringing together different business sectors, such as space, such as parks, such as advanced technology and manufacturing, because economic development in any city is very important, we want to bring those together. So let's create a smart city community rather than just a smart city.
Awesome. So I think it's very important, extremely important, to understand what you're trying to do. Back to the previous panel, you gotta know your problem, be able to define your problem right before you go solving it. So for us, there's a lot of discussion through each one of these 6 outcomes that we talk about. What is it we're trying to achieve? So mobility, for example, right? We've already lost that fight of better directing traffic in Austin, right? I can direct you anywhere. It takes me 20 minutes to get out of the garage to the first main street. It's over, right? So it's really about getting folks to look at alternative forms of transportation. Right? Do we want to fight or support scooters? Right? I mean, do we really want to fight it? There's a lot of safety issues, but let's face it, it's not going away. It's brilliant. Right? Every kid loves it. Right? I love it. I had a first scooter before they came out. Right? But how do we do it? How do we do it right? Right? How do we do it to increase mobility, right, and access? Healthcare, same thing, right? A lot of problem with healthcare because we're bound in the city. It's not like it was trying to solve a different problem at the state. It's really make sure people know where the services are and that they're not afraid to use the services for whatever reason, right? It could be pride, it could be immigration status, whatever, and people don't want to step out and they don't get the care that they need. So how do we do that with Smart City? How do we change our outreach? How do we use websites or so on and so forth? So, and it goes on, right? So each one of the categories, we have some very specific discussions about the true problem we're trying to solve. And then we have initiatives to go and solve that, right? With smart metering, water and power. Power is always looking at ways to improve their systems. I did a tour of the water plants, and you guys would be very, very impressed, especially the smart factories guys, that these water plants do the whole, there's only 3 or 4 throughout the city. There's only 5 people on a shift. These things are 20 acres. It's beautiful. They've got it down to an art. They're fully automated, right? They're so efficient. It's fantastic. But we do all of that, but with exactly what problem we're trying to solve. And we're building new websites. We're doing all of this stuff. But it comes back to what problem are we really trying to solve?
Okay. Arun?
So when we work on smart cities, we take the utility view. Why is smart cities important for a utility? We generally look at our customers. We call them ratepayers. We are starting to call them customers recently, and they are also citizens, right? So they're the same people with 3 different labels on them, right? Attributes, however you want to call it. And to us, we serve up upstate New York, Boston area, and Massachusetts, Rhode Island. The scary fact is about half of our customers are low and moderate income customers who are struggling to pay our energy bills. And these are people, if you look into their lives, when we talk to them as citizens and customers, we really understand what's driving their life. And if you talk to a low and moderate income customer, they spend about $400 in basic mobility, just getting to work and coming back, right? And they don't have internet connectivity, broadband, digital divide is happening. So as we talk to our customers, it is all these things that impacts their life, that impacts our business. So we are inevitably there in front of them. We have the right to serve them. We don't differentiate our customers between low and moderate income, just like how government does as a regulated utility company. And so we see a smart city as an extension of our services that we are anyway delivering. We don't choose. We have to deliver, so we better deliver it right. So that's how we view smart city. And to us, smart city, it's a long game. It's a big visionary game. It's where I think internet was in 1995, right? Nobody knew what Amazon was in 1995. You created a web page that had some fancy pictures, that was internet, and today it's a completely different animal. So we think the smart city is going to be very big, and so we have to build it fundamentally like the way we built internet. And I'm in a digital conference, and I've been in digital space before smart city and a few other digital transformations. Getting smart is the 3rd step, and everybody jumps to smart. Smart, you cannot get to smart before you do 2 fundamental things. The first thing is standardize. If you don't standardize things at the technology, network, and device layer, you can never get to the next step. So standardization is something utilities do fantastic. That's a space we dominate. That's how we operate the grid. The grid that we put together 100 years ago still operates because it was built on standards, right? So standardization is a strength utilities do. The second part of this transformation, standardize is the first step. The second part is semantics. All the smartness is going to come from data, and the only way we can use data is by standardizing data on the semantic layer. We're standardizing it on cybersecurity. We are standardizing on storage. And so semantics and standardization are the first 2 steps. And those are pretty big steps, and I don't want anybody to think those are easy steps. And it comes from culture and vision from the early on, because data is multi-purpose, and most of smart city that is happening today as we see it, smart cities are currently being driven by one thing. Believe it or not, it's the brand. Every city is driving smart city. There's a lot of unique projects because it's got a brand, and a lot of purpose-built projects are out there, and they serve only one purpose, and when you try to take the data from that project to another project, it doesn't work. If you try to take the sensor from that project to another project, it doesn't work. So we are all about, when we think about it in utility, we love standardization, we love multiplicity. So we are working from standardization all the way from the value it's going to produce. Ultimately, the citizens care about value. They don't care about the technology behind it. And so we want to drive value through all these steps, and that's a place where we think we can play a really important role. We think if we can unlock the value of data, the innovation of the world is so big that we cannot even imagine. I started playing with SimCity 20 years ago, right? Whoever thought that was an interesting game, right? And so you have people, gamers, you have teenagers who would get involved if you unlock the data for them, and instead of they playing a game, they could be crowdsourcing a problem and solving it. So that's the vision of smart city, is how do you make data simple enough and accessible enough so the world can solve the problem. And we as a utility feel we have a unique role in stepping that to that next step.
So now phase 2 is getting you two guys into the discussion. So you've heard the responses from these guys, and I'm curious, you're working with a lot of different communities, a lot of cities across the country, across the world. How does what we just heard align with what you're seeing? Is there anything that's been missed?
So if we take a step back, the definition of smart cities to us is inherently local. It is a local definition. It is what is trying to be achieved by the city and working backwards. So whether it's citizen engagement, public safety, or environmental, what works in Austin doesn't work in the Gaslamp district on a Friday night, or in Cleveland, or in Las Vegas by the Spaghetti Bowl. And so what we do is we take a step back, we build platforms and infrastructure that allows cities to engage and develop different applications based on what they're trying to achieve. So if it's public safety and ShotSpotter, we can enable that on our digital infrastructure. If it's ozone monitoring and air quality, that can be enabled on smart streetlights. It's those types of applications. And now, the challenge that we run into is, as you know, I cited that $5 sensor, right? So as hockey pucks are being put in sidewalks to detect ice and snow, and parking meters and whatever the device might be, the challenge is integrating that data. And we heard some of that, where we have to add contextualization to that data. And so we've created a smart cities operation platform that allows utilities to create different not utilities, but cities to create different dashboards based upon what they're trying to achieve, because what works in one city doesn't work in another city. And the dashboard for Miami does not look the same as the dashboard for Cleveland. So that's the way we approach it and try to build those scalable architectures behind it. And I'm not on Jerry Springer, right? Itron's a great customer.
We are great partners. We didn't talk about money, and I think it's an important component of how to improve our lives in all these cities and communities. And most of my time is really dedicated to understanding how to take these solutions that I talked about before in a way that is viable, economically speaking, to those communities. And how do we understand really the business case of each one of these applications, of the gunshot detection or the air quality monitoring and the traffic monitoring, etc. So each one of those inherently has to be understood from a financial perspective in order to build the mechanism that allows it to actually get financed and deployed. And exactly, because cities all want to be smart. Who doesn't want to be smart? But can you afford that? I mean, we see a trend a year before elections. You know, everybody projects for smart cities, kind of getting a hockey stick because they need to have a strong show before elections. But it really, it's an infrastructure, like you said, that you're building for a city for the coming 20, 30 years. So deploying a sensor out there, you have to look at it financially for the next 20 years. It's not just next year. So how do we build the model that financially makes this a reality? And I think this is really what we're spending a lot of time, and we're bringing a lot of financial partners, and we talked about P3 this morning. I heard that a lot for the buildings around us. It's an extremely interesting model, and it's amazing to see here a combination of academia, private sector, and government and municipalities, and there's no other way around it. All these people have to be involved to make it happen.
The question is, which city or cities could we look as the shining light on the hill? That is the one that, or the ones that we would say that's the ideal. Those are the ones leading the charge for anybody.
Prior to Brownsville, I was working for the city of Hutto, which is, I was assistant city manager there, and we were actually going through that exercise. And West Hollywood in California has historically been the leader, also I think Kansas City. So I was talking to people, not the government side of it, not just the consultant, not to say that that's bad, but you
Hey now, hey.
you talk about, they want to sell a product, I get it. But I also need to look at that bottom line. And so the P3 structure, that's the key. So when you go talk to a city, why don't you bring those partners already? Why don't you see, right now we're leveraging Smart City Community with our ISD. The city of Brownsville is not paying all of this Smart Community initiative. I want the port, I want ISD, I want the city, I want the UTRGV. It's the partnerships. It's not just one solution. We don't have an endless amount of money. And so how do you show that? How do you sell that to your council members? By leveraging your return on investment. What is that ROI? How much am I going to save you in energy costs? The ROI is important. Also, many cities are going away from the 1 year budgeting. A lot of cities are now looking at 3 to 5 year budgeting for infrastructure costs because of the costs of roads and infrastructure. So we're going away from those. A lot of cities, you'll see that. And with that, you can come up with a plan of how to really honor 3 to 5 years. What should that plan look like?
Other examples?
So I think that's a little unfair of a question, right? Because you want my answers, Austin, right? And you asked me who the best cook in the room is. It's me, right? But the truth is that all the communities are doing something innovative in one way or another, right, when it comes to smart city, whether it's on procurement end, on the delivery end. And if we say this one city is better than the other, right, then we're fooling ourselves. I think we have to go out and look for the best in breed in whatever we're trying to solve, right? On the procurement front, for example, right, we're, 15,000 to 20,000 seats, something like that on O365, right? When I look out who's better, right? In the state, at HHS, I was 60,000 seats. I would look at their practice, right? But to be honest, New York is 100,000 seats, right? So New York may not rank as the most innovative city just because of its reputation, right? But the problem they have to solve are so big, right? I look down, I'm stepping in their footprints almost every step of the way, right? So I look at those, I look at Denver, right? I look at everybody, in different spots. Somebody's doing something really, really great, so I think it's hard to say who's better and who's the shining star. I don't think there is one. I think the way to measure that outcome is where do people want to be, right? What are the biggest, fastest growing cities, right? Because they're offering the best services and they're able to keep up with growth, right? Austin's fantastic. I give them a lot of credit. I've been there a short time, but look at the explosion of growth in Austin and people still want to come, right? We're not falling behind, right? We're feeling the pain, but we're not falling behind. Two different things.
So I'll just throw my head in the ring on this as well. It's an interesting question because when you're planning a smart city, you want to look at those who have taken the arrows before you, so that you can learn from their steps. One of the challenges is that we're in the early stages of smart city, especially in the United States. So if you want to start looking at examples of where smart city has really pushed forward, a lot of the times it's outside of the United States. Places like Amsterdam, for example, that's been extremely progressive and has put together a very thoughtful plan. And I think what you guys are touching on here in terms of building the business case is music to my ears, because what I do for all day long is develop financial analysis around these issues, because the message that I deliver to my clients is don't build smart for the sake of smart. You're not trying to keep up with the Joneses. What you're trying to do is build value. And so you're building at the speed of value. So there are areas where I've literally said to some communities and some utilities, in this particular area, based on the business case, let's keep you dumb, because dumb is more cost effective than smart. But let's focus the attention on those areas that really add value. So there are places that have innovated, but I think in some areas the cost of innovation is not going to prove true in the end. So it's thoughtful investment rather than who's farthest out in front. But a place like Amsterdam is sort of an interesting one. Any others?
I tend to agree that I think that we've seen a lot of development happening outside of the United States, and in different regions it came for different reasons. I think in Europe we saw a very acute awareness to climate change and environmental issues driving a lot of investment from governments and from communities to provide solutions that will help mitigate those carbon emissions and reduce traffic congestion, but all in the sake of improving environmental indexes. In the city of Copenhagen, where we're working very closely with them, we managed to help them save 76% of the energy that they use for their streetlights in the city, which at the basis in the beginning, it was 40% of their entire energy bill at the city level. So it's a tremendous change. And beyond that, we also help them reduce 50% of the operational and maintenance cost of these streetlights. But the second step after that is adding all the air quality monitoring and traffic management to understand how to try to address the next level of challenges. In Asia Pacific, the urbanization and industrialization cause tremendous pressure on cities, where if we think Austin is bad, go to India, go to Indonesia. Austin is amazing for traffic. And they really suffer from pollution, from traffic, and they need solutions. So they've been funneling money in order to solve problems. And what we saw there is that extremely advanced cities, they don't talk as much as Barcelona or as much as Amsterdam, but they have done far more in some cases than many other cities that are doing a lot better in marketing and PR.
You look at our EV program and you look at the interests of the private companies into bringing their EV programs to Austin, and you can Google your way into that. You'll see that Austin's becoming quite the center of discussion. Our transportation guy, Jonathan, was it, Greg?
Carl.
Yeah, so, I mean, they're brilliant. I mean, these are some of the best in the industry, and we talk EV, you know, all day long where we see those guys, and I do really think that it's going to make a big difference, of course, in the quality of life, air quality, and the environment, right? But also in the sense that, you know, these will be smart vehicles more open to being communication data, right, we talked about, and be able to take some of those feeds from the sensors, the traffic, or so on and so forth, to try and, you know, give you intelligence around how you should map your commute, whether you should take an alternate version of transportation that day, right? And I think more people adopt to being open and they free their minds, right, away from their own vehicle, right? And I think that's where mobility will make a big difference, right? Because we just can't keep adding singular vehicles, you know, to the road every time somebody moves into town, whether it's electric or otherwise, right? You can be fully automated, doesn't really matter, right? The more vehicles we add, the more congestions we have. We have to look at alternative forms of transportation.
The issue around open data, how open is the data going to be? To what extent? How deep into the operations am I getting? What does that look like? Another layer of detail on what you were laying out before.
So the data question is a very big question, and I think it starts with privacy, it starts with cybersecurity, and governance. So those are areas we currently we are asking cities to take leadership on it. We want the cities to own the data and then create governance models around it. And the fundamental challenge with data is, you know, cybersecurity is all over the map. Everybody's trying to get hold of the data, right? And there's a lot of monetary value to the data. So there's a little bit of nuance between completely opening up the data versus some level of control of the data. The second challenge or opportunity, however you want to see it, is the data's values as it gets applied to different analytics. And in the computer world, it's, you know, data in the cloud and from one cloud to another cloud, and before you know it, you have 20 APIs. The data is in 20 places, and once it gets breached, who's responsible? So it gets really out of whack very quickly. So one is the data itself being clean and semantically logical to use it, with built-in attributes and the language to understand it. And the second is governance has to really take up a big space. So cities, as they start this smart city journey, they have to really start cataloging what data they're collecting and what's the privacy level of that data. That's like one of the first steps we expect cities to do. And once they create the privacy level, they have to create owners for these data. And once they define an owner, the owner's responsibility then goes to the next level of, you know, keeping the data of a certain attributes and semantics and protection layer based on how it's classified. And this is not new. Federal government does this for a long time with their data. I used to work in defense contracting. Every farm, everything, the data was so nicely managed. The same principles need to get applied to the smart city space. So those models exist, but it's in a different domain. And once we do that, I think the technology side is easy. You can lock it as much as you want, or you can make it as much open as you want. It's the legal side of it that needs to get addressed before we go on the technology journey.
Yeah, and just one thing to add on to that is that for those of you that were here last night and heard the keynote from last night and looked at that graph, that hockey stick, that there are 50 billion IoT devices out there, and you've seen the explosive growth, and that growth is not slowing down. It's going to continue. So I would say keep in mind when you're building your smart city that you're not building it for today's needs, you're building it for tomorrow's needs. So everything is going to be interconnected. So you need to build your standards, your communication platform, everything, your data management and protocols to be able to handle the traffic for tomorrow. And the data governance that Arun just touched on is a critical issue to make sure that you're safeguarding those issues.
I think the important thing, is very different than private, right? The important thing to understand that in public service, it's your data, right? It's not my data, right? You pay me, right? It's your data. These are your programs, right? So we have a sense of, in the state, we call it PIA, Public Information Access. I think it's public information request to the city. You can ask for anything. Now, things that are regulated, NIST, CGIS, HIPAA, PI, NERC, right? You're not going to get it, right? Things that are confidential, right? That may pose a risk to us operationally, or could offer a competitive advantage if it's a contract information. You know what I'm saying? Those things are confidential, right? We have the same thing as we do in private. Right, so it's actually the policy is pretty open, it's pretty easy, right? The problem you're going to have is accessibility, right? We have an open data portal, right, and it starts with the biggest piece of population we can service, right? Financial data is super transparent, right? It's required, right, in any government, right? It is at the city. If you look at the state, and you look at the comptroller's website, you can punch it up right now. All about transparency. He's an elected official for the state. He's all about transparency of data, right? You look for his site, that he's shooting information about state finances in your face, the whole site, right? So the more smart city things depends on what you're asking for, right? Yeah, some of it's much more readily available, some of it will take a little bit longer, right? And as with all PIA requests, if it's easily accessible, it's free, right? But if we have to go incur a bunch of costs, we'll pass that on, and you have to decide whether that's important to you or not, right, to gather that data, right? It's all about economic development. We offer data on economic things all the time, right? How many businesses are here? What are the opportunities? How big's this sector? How big's that sector? What's the spending, right? All this thing you hear on NPR, that's all PIA data, right? It's not magic, right? The agencies are collecting that for y'all, right? So as far as that goes, you can ask for anything as long as it's not confidential, right? Or we regulate it, right? We'll try and get it for you. If it's readily available, it'll be free. If it's not, we'll give you a bill, and you can decide whether you want to do that or not.
And I think he answered it perfectly. I don't really add anything other than, sometimes when we put cameras in our downtown, we got a lot of pushback. Big Brother, what are you watching? And we did say, reminding people, public information, if it's actually there's a crime, we're not going to give you that data, or there is a privacy that we take into consideration with those things, and so just having that conversation with our residents and our business owners was something that we did have to do prior to putting the cameras in, and so it's worked well for us, but actually just that transparency, that open conversation with everyone is very important.
All right, our time is up. I want to thank our panelists. Please help me join me in thanking our panel.